If you've watched the videos on this channel, you know that I've, for years and years now, been slowly working out this campaign idea of Windhaven, also known as, the Ruins of Trocare. Windhaven being the city or colony the PCs are based out of, and Trocare being the ruined city that serves as the main dungeon exploration place. And one of the more recent things that I have been working on is the original idea had that it had a backstory for how Windhaven was founded, but the game starts with it already being there. There's already people in it. It's already an established colony. It's self-sufficient, and then the PCs arrive there and then start pushing civilization beyond the walls, essentially. However, part of me thought it would be kind of fun to have the PCs involved in the actual founding of the colony, where they're helping to make decisions on where to locate it, what kind of defenses to build, what are we going to prioritize as far as building a lumber mill or building a granary or whatnot. And looking around at various systems, one of the ones that came up was called ACKS. It's ACKS, and it stands for the Adventurer Conqueror King system. So ACKS is a game, it's based on old school D&D, specifically what's known as Basic and Expert D&D, or BX. And it is explicitly designed around the idea that characters go through 3 phases as they rise up in levels. The early levels are the adventurer levels. So your characters go exploring dungeons, defeating monsters, gaining treasure, gaining experience. And then the second one is Conqueror, and this is where you start doing wilderness travel. And players will... Now, in old school D&D, dungeons are dangerous. They're filled with traps and monsters, etc. But the wilderness is even more dangerous. And so you ended up with civilizations where when you were near a city, you were generally safe. But as soon as you ventured past that, it was a very, very dangerous wilderness environment where all kinds of monsters in very large numbers could show up and wreck your stuff. And that's why the reason why merchants would get so rich is because they were the only people that were stupid enough and capable enough to take goods from one place to another across the map. If you couldn't get a certain resource in this town and they were bringing it in from another town, they could get a very good price for it. But in order to do that trade, it wasn't routine. It's not like driving a long-haul truck across the country. Caravans were very, very well guarded because of the threat of monster attacks. And they would basically set out with their own mini army to deter monsters from attacking in the first place, and of course to try and fight them off in the second place. So in the Conqueror section in ACKS, the PCs are mid-levels, and they start to explore the wilderness and find monster lairs and other such problematic areas and actually clear them out. So, for example, let's just say that there's a fortress filled with 100-something orcs. It's in these levels when player characters have to go and find a way to get rid of that. Or there might be like a nest of griffins, and the players have to go and get rid of it. And the reason they get rid of these things, the whole purpose behind conquering the land, is that then they become kings in the land. And so there's explicit rules for how to clear out a hex of monster lairs and then establish a stronghold. And by doing that, you've now created a safe environment with, a stronghold and troops nearby to protect people. And so people will start to move to that area of land and start farming and paying taxes and whatnot. And as you grow in power, you're able to clear additional areas of land and start building additional strongholds and creating vassals and whatnot. And so you can build up your own area of influence, your own kingdom, as it were. And so the game, like I said, it's explicitly designed around that. So I bought the game a while ago. I've had it because I wanted to look into it when it first came out, and I was interested in it, but it didn't really capture me at that time. The game came out in like 2012-ish or so, and I was just graduating from pharmacy school and getting ready to go into residency. Didn't really have time for D&D at the time, so I read through the book a little bit. It was interesting. I liked some of it. Years later now, I'm coming back to it because somebody recommended it as a potential option. And now I'm actually getting into the system. Like, I'm invested. I'm looking into how it will work. Of course, once again, the idea of the players being there right at the very founding of the colony isn't exactly supported by the system. There's still you don't have to use it, but there is a very detailed and mechanically heavy trade system to figure out what kind of mercantile ventures you can do. And those wouldn't really work out necessarily in mine. So what I'm doing right now is actually creating a completely separate setting. I have said, okay, as usual, Windhaven, sit in the background. I am literally going to create a completely brand new campaign world from scratch, using this system to figure out how this system works. And then once I get a better understanding of this system, then I can make modifications or figure out the implications of any changes and then use Windhaven. So what I'm going to show you now, I have the PDF open in the other window here. And so literally there's a section, chapter 10, it tells you how to construct the campaign setting. And step 1 is map the setting. So it tells you you're going to create a map. You're actually going to create 2 maps. It wants you to create a larger map called the regional map. And then you're going to zoom in on a portion of that that huge regional map. And that's going to become your campaign map. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I did that backwards. The campaign map is the big map, and the regional map is the smaller subsection of that. I thought I had that backwards. So, you don't have to map out literally the entire world. You just have to map out these 2 sections. The very first map is... So they recommend using a standard sheet of graph paper, which is about 30 by 40 hexes. And so they say that the first... that's 1,200 total hexes. And the first map, the campaign map, the big area map, is about... each of those hexes is 24 miles across, from flat edge to flat edge. So that is an area, if I remember correctly, it mentions that that's about the area of half the United States. So it's a humongous amount of area. However, if the campaign setting that is implied in the book is called the Aran Empire, and it's based on the Mediterranean in a way. So there's an example of their campaign map, and the whole middle of it is an ocean, and then there's just land kind of circled around the edges of it. So even though it's about half the size of the U.S. fully mapped, you don't really have to fill in all of that with land and whatnot. Okay, so then you take a subsection of that map, and again, using a standard piece of graph paper, which is about 30 by 40 hexes. These hexes are now 6 miles across. So they're 1/4 the size. There's 4 of these 6-mile hexes to reach across a 24-mile hex, or about 16 6-mile hexes fit in one 24-mile hex. All right. So what did we do? So one, I don't have an idea for a campaign world. Like, I'm making one from scratch. I'm coming in with a completely blank mind. And so my first thought is, I don't want to sit down and map out a big area, because usually when you're going to sit down and map out an area, you kind of have an idea of what you're wanting to accomplish with it. You're saying to yourself, oh, I want to make a campaign setting that kind of looks like the Mediterranean. And so you sit down and you look at a map of the Mediterranean, and then you switch things around a little bit. You know, you draw a slightly different shape, and then you create the lands around it and add some mountains and rivers and whatnot. I don't want to do that. I don't have an idea to begin with. So what I've done is I've gotten my worldographer, and I open up And I generated a bunch of just ones that are called generated, but I ended up going with this one. So this is the map I generated. And I said, okay, that's great. This'll work. There's a lot of terrain to it, not a lot of, flat open land, but for whatever reason, this map spoke to me. So then, one of the things to mention about this map, which I found out later, when you generate a map in Worldographer, or also known as Hexographer 2, when you tell it to generate a section, it'll randomly generate an area for you. But if you say that it's one region, let's say it this way. If you say it's a full world, which is what I did, you end up with polar ice cap, and then that's it. So this is essentially, the North, the Arctic, and the Antarctic, and that's why that ends up on a map like this. Whereas if you generate a region, it's not going to do that. So let's just generate a region real quick. I'm just going to leave all these at default. So if we do that, that was insane. Why did it do that? File, new. Oh, these are set. That's a stupid thing that I did. I'm actually going to generate this slightly differently. So let's do it that way. There we go. Generate the map. Okay, so here's our map. So now it's a region. It still's got these polar ice caps on it. I thought I got rid of those. But anyway, or we can generate a whole world. And each of these would have worked as a perfectly fine map. I actually like both of them. Okay, let's not do new. Let's stop playing around with Worldographer. That's not the point here. Okay, so anyway, this map, this particular one, happens to be 30 by 40, because that's what I generated. And because of the if you look here, the pixel width of the height and the width are different. They're not exactly the same. And so that's why the map looks like it's much taller than it is wide. Even though it's 30 by 40, it looks almost like it's 30 by like 70. Or 30 by like, 50 or 60. But that's just because the hexes are not perfect. They are a little bit squashed. So, we take this, and the example in the book, after you create the world, and then you pick an area to zoom in on, it actually says on the world map, go ahead and start creating some kingdoms, or empires, kingdoms, principalities, etc. There's a whole hierarchy where there's an empire, which is a collection of kingdoms, and then a kingdom is a collection of principalities, and then a principality is a collection of duchies, and then duchies are counties, and counties are marches, and marches are baronies, and at each level they get smaller and smaller and work their way down. So looking at a map like this, I see that a principality is about 18 to 65 24-mile hexes. So I portioned off some areas on here, and if we open this and we go to the borders map, boink, you'll see that I have created some areas down here. So I decided to start at the south end of the island here, and basically just chunked off this farmland and a bunch of forest over here, and I called that place Glendow. And then I liked this whole huge group of mountains here, and then I just kind of swooped some grassland in. And then a bunch of mountainous and hilly forests with a little bit of farmland in it, and called it Wen. And then over here, a bunch of this farmland, and then just kind of swooped in some extra territory, and I don't know why. I think I wanted to swoop this farmland in, and I wanted to swoop this farmland in, so it just made sense that they kind of controlled this peninsula. So, where did I get this from? One of the other things that this does is, if you go into here, data, world info, the game actually randomly not the game, this hexographer actually generates nation names. So, Glaunu, or whatever this is supposed to be, I just renamed it Glendow, because Glendow is much easier to say. And then Bermver ended up over here. Kondrakar I made up myself because I like dwarves and I feel like I'm able to do dwarf names. And then there's like different cultures, and I liked the culture name of Wen, so I just decided to name this area Wen. And then I liked this name of Fenereux, and so I named the whole area Fenereux, etc. So like I'm literally just stealing stuff. And at this point, like I said, I don't have an idea of any of this. So I'm just looping around and saying, okay, this is one country, and this is another one, and this is another one, and then this is another one. But other than the fact that, for example, Wen is, if you looked at the world info here for the culture, Wen says it's based on Chinese. And they have, you know, they're dark-skinned humans, etc., etc. They value competition, openness, creativity. I'm not necessarily keeping any of those details, especially because, one, I'm using this as a culture, but then the other ones that I'm looking at are nations, Fenereux, etc. So I'm just grabbing random crap, throwing it onto a map. Okay, so then the game says, after you've added a couple of these places, nope, come back here, close you. It says, okay, so you've figured out your principalities, which is what these things would fit into. This is like 63 hexes, and this is like 49 hexes, and this is like 39 hexes or whatever. They all fit into that 18 to 65 principality range. So then the thing says, okay, then go ahead and give out population, and it gives you some population density and says this many families per hex, etc., etc. And go ahead and figure out the revenue that the realm creates, and based on the population density and based on the population density and the size of the realm, figure out what the largest city would be. So, for example, Glendow is 63 hexes, and each of the hexes has like 500 families. And so it's got like this really big population, and would end up having, I believe it has a city in it. And so then it says to place the city. There's like villages, towns, cities, large cities, metropolises, depending on how many people there are. So it says go ahead and place the city, and you usually place it where there's water. So, you know, you have Glendow. It's got shoreline, and then it also has this river here. And so it makes sense that somewhere right around this river delta, you'd have a great big city, because one, it's going to have sea access to trade. And then, of course, you got the river going in, so it's got trade with the river. And then you also, of course, have fresh water with the river, etc., etc. So I'm just trying to find out where that map is. We did borders. Provinces. There we go. So we come in here again. And I placed a city here, and I called it Osu. One of the things that I was doing was going based on the whole a principality is made up of a bunch of duchies. I blocked off duchies, and duchies are supposed to be, you know, so big. So it says here a duchy is 4 to 11. And so I broke each of them up into duchies of 4, you know, somewhere close to 4 to 11. This thing's 63. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them. 3 of them are 11 big, and then the other 3 are 10 big. And added the main largest city in all of Glendow. Now you might notice, some of you might notice, this is OSU, which is located in Stillwater, Oklahoma. My wife made me do this. She didn't make me do this, but I'm doing it because of her. And like I said, I have nothing invested in this, so I'm just adding stuff. And you'll see like Oxborough and Notladeep. And if we go in here to the world info, we have Oxborough and not Plydene, which I just changed to Notladeep, etc. So I'm just pulling random names out. So here's Kondrakar, and I created the city of Kondrakar, which is the main capital. And then Wen, and I stole Shidong from one of the nation names. And then I also grabbed like Shan, Liaoning, and Chuan from actual provinces in China. Not necessarily that these names are specifically from them, but I looked at a list of provinces in China and then just grabbed certain names that I liked out of it. And then Fenereux, which I had absolutely no idea what to name their city, but theirs got placed over here. Fenereux's main city and Glendow's main city basically are the same thing. They're in the plains with ocean access. There's obviously a nice bay here, and it's got a river, so that's great. Kandrakar, being the dwarves, ended up right in the middle of all the mountains. And when I decided that they were going to build their castle next to this lake up high in the mountains, a very defensible position, but still with decent access to the ocean. So, yeah, that's the thought process that went through my mind at this point. So then the game says, pick an area of this map and zoom in on it, and that's where you create your 6-mile hex map. And my original idea is to do it somewhere over here, because I had put the most work into developing Glendow. I had, a couple names for it. Wen was the other place that I spent some time developing. Kandrakar, not at all. And so I was like, okay, well, somewhere over here we can do it. And I'm trying to find a place like we could go down here and kind of take this area, or we can go up here and kind of take this area. And then I decided, nope, we're going to go over here and take this area. So what I did, we go, not new. I'm so good at picking new. Go to open. We're going to go to regional map with rivers. No, we want just the regional map. Boom. And you're going to notice it. This is the reason why that thing was set to 9:11. And it was because I actually recreated a section of the other map from scratch. And that's this one. I literally picked an area. So this is Bermver up here. And this is Wen. And that's Shidong. And I just recreated that map in here. And then drilled down to the next level. So now what this has done, here's the world map. Maybe. No? You're not going to let me do that? There we go. There's the world map. All right. And then we're going to switch it down to the continent level. And the very first time you do this, the game asks you, how many hexes do you want to turn this hex into? So since this is 24 miles across, and I want to make 6-mile hexes, then it's 4 hexes across. So when you go to the continent level, that hex then turns into this. And then I painstakingly, by hand, went back through the map and made sure that all of these hexes exactly matched the original map. So if we go in here to the provinces map. Oh, come on, please. Maybe? I think I froze it. There we go. Okay. The more stuff you open, the worse it's going to get. Okay, so you might notice that the Bermver map follows kind of along here and captures Shidong and then comes up like that. So we're in this area. And then when you go down to the continent level, we need to go this way. We've kind of basically gotten this area, right? This is the area that the other map has. So I went through and matched every single one of these hexes to the other map. I did that because I am stupid. So we're going to go back into the other map as soon as it decides to open. There we go. And we're going to pan over. Oh, actually, I even, on the continent... What map did I just open? Oh, the play area. Yeah, okay. So yeah, I boxed out what area I wanted to use for the smaller map. So this is 9. Not 9. 3, 6, 8. So 8 times 4 is 32. And then this is 12. And 12 times 4 is 48. So I created a 32 by 48 hex regional map. And that's the region that I did. And that's what gave us this map, which loads faster because it's much smaller. Okay, so then we zoom in. Okay, so now I'm at the part of the game, or in the book where it says to place... You find out the largest settlement in each of these, duchies, etc., and then you can break it down even further, etc. But we're now to the spot where it says... I'm skipping a section that I've done. Let's not skip that section real quick. So after creating the big cities, there's a thing that you can create for trade purposes called demand modifiers. And so they're randomly generated for like 20 something, 30 something categories. Which I'll just show them to you real quick. So you randomly create domain modifiers for grain and fish and all of these things, all of those. And then you add modifiers based on how old the settlement is, where it's located, what the climate is, whether or not a particular race controls it. And then the land, each of these hexes has a certain land value associated with it. So when you build a city, land value is ranges from 3 to 9. And that's how many gold pieces per family you get when you're in control of that area. And so if you have a city that's in very rich land, it actually decreases the amount of demand that you need, because basically your land is producing a lot of stuff for you already. And if you build a city on really crappy land, your demand modifiers go up because of obviously your land is crap, and so you need to import a lot of stuff. So I did that for the various capital cities. It was a pain in the butt. It was a lot of work. And I was doing it on a spreadsheet to kind of make it even easier. God help me if I had to do it for everything. Because actually the next step for that part is you find all of the smaller settlements around these big cities. And then you would create random demand modifiers for them and go through the whole process for adjustments. And then if they're within a certain range of a larger market, that larger market actually shifts their demand modifiers in a direction. So like as long as it took to just do the 4 capitals, it would take that much longer each additional set of cities that you do. And then of course you then have to apply these shifts to demand. And I didn't want to do that, so I stopped doing that because that's a bunch of crap. All right, so then you assign NPC rulers, figure out who the rulers are for the various cities and whatnot, or domains, or regions, or what have you. So then it says when you do the regional map. So now we're literally to the spot that says constructing the region. You go ahead and map that out. And then it wants you to place 45 static points of interest on this map. So here's this map. There's actually one extra row of hexes on this map. So it's not an 8x12, it's a 9x12. Just because the way that the hexes lined up on the original map, the first column was down, but when you generate a map, the left first column has to be in the up position. So I just had to add an extra row of hexes to account for that. So anyway, wants you to place 45 static points of interest on this map. About a third of those, so about 15, should be settlements, towns, and castles of these places. So I should have like about 15 cities and settlements along this area of the map. Now my map is a little bit different. It does specifically say that when you go to the regional map, about half of the map should be settled. And if you take like this line here and go across, this part right here is about halfway of the map. This Bermverse section here kind of slots down and fills in parts of this, but I'm a little bit low on the civilized land, I believe. But anyway, yeah, so I should create about 15 different settlements or something in this swath of land. And then the other 30 should be out here in the wild. And it says these should be basically dungeons, lairs, or special areas. And it says, of the 30 dungeons, we recommend 3 large dungeons that will last about 6 to 10 play sessions, 10 dungeons for 1 to 2 sessions, and then 17 small lairs that might take up half a session. So that's 3 and 17 and 10, and that's all 30 of the things that are supposed to be over here. So basically, 3 big mega dungeons. I say mega dungeons, but bigger dungeons. 10 medium-sized to small dungeons, and then 17 really small little adventure locales. And then you don't have to... You just place them on the map. You don't have to design all of them. Because if I put a big dungeon right here, and the players are starting in a village over here, the chances that they're going to just like beeline right to my dungeon are super low. So you're going to put it on the map. You're going to just put a sentence or two or whatever of description for it. And then when it comes time, you come up with that. Now, the big issue with my particular area, there's a big issue. And what it is, the big issue with it is, remember what country I spent the least time thinking about when I was talking about the big map? I knew that the Wen map was kind of Chinese, and I knew that the Kandrakars were dwarves, and then I knew that Glendow, I told you I had been putting the most work into Glendow as far as kind of like a conceptualization. I literally, at this point, had absolutely no clue what Bermver was. It was a stupid name, Bermver, and it didn't really imply anything to me. And so this is the area where I've just been sitting for a couple days, and then finally I decided, you know what? Bermver is going to be Vikings. And really that coalesced. I was reading some blogs about ACKS because going through this whole process, if it sounds like I'm a little confused about it, I'm super duper confused about it. Within the entire book, this section is the worst to grasp if you've never done this kind of stuff before. Unfortunately, like there's a lot of clarifications on the author's website. They've got some forums there, and as I've been Googling questions about ACKS, I keep getting directed to the forums where they've answered them, which is great. But I really wish they would rewrite this section, or actually put together an example of exactly what what it could look like. The guy was talking at some point. I don't remember exactly what someone said, but he basically said everybody gets caught up in this section when they're going through the book, and he doesn't get why. He keeps saying, you guys are so fine with modifying dungeons and modifying monsters and modifying treasure tables and wandering encounter tables. Why do you so slavishly adhere to the exact directions in this section of the book? Why don't you just start modifying this like you modify everything else? To which I would reply, for me personally, I've never done this part before. I've run dungeons before and done treasure generation before and wandering monsters and all that. I've done that for years, but I've never done realm management. So this is a whole brand new system, and until I understand the system as written, I don't know that I can make modifications to it, because I'm a big believer that I should only modify things after I understand them. I don't want to waste my time. I don't want to make modifications to the system and then try to play the game and then find out that my modifications completely break the game, and then the game falls apart and it's not fun anymore. Because it wastes my time, and my time is valuable. So that's why I'm going through the rules and trying to do exactly what I think the book is telling me to do, and then running into issues. If you do get the ACKS book, I will point out a couple clarifications from this section. One, the examples do not follow one another. They should, but they don't. So the thing starts off with an example of this guy's going to create this area, and he decides to build, this empire or this kingdom, and breaks it up into these various categories. And then when it goes to the next example, you think it's following those same categories, but then they're not. It's actually a completely separate example, which it shouldn't be. It should be every one of the examples in this section should all be one whole, essentially. They should all apply to the exact same thing. That way you can actually follow along and see exactly what's going on from one step to the next. One of the other issues is there's an example where it mentions that this guy created a kingdom that's about 30% of the maximum size of a kingdom. And so then they're applying 30% to this number, 7,776. And if you're looking through the various tables that are right here in this section, there's not a single reference to the number 7,776. Where you would think to look for it. You can find that number, So, for example, you look at kingdom and you see that the maximum number of baronies is 7,776. But when you're first looking at it and you're trying to figure out the size of a kingdom, you're looking at the table above that and not seeing the number anywhere. So it can be confusing, and I've had to spend a lot of time figuring it out. But anyway, we're not going to talk necessarily about Bernver this time because I have prattled on for half an hour. It's probably very confusing, but next time we're going to start talking about Bernver since I've actually started to develop some of it. So until then, bye-bye.